The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in Master Chen's karate academy, casting harsh shadows across the worn wooden floor. It was March 1985 in downtown Chicago, and the late afternoon sun struggled to penetrate the grimy windows of the converted warehouse that housed one of the city's most respected martial arts schools. Tommy Nakamura pushed through the heavy glass door, his slight frame dwarfed by his oversized duffel bag. At 15, he stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed maybe 110 pounds soaking wet. His black hair fell across his eyes as he surveyed the training floor, where 24 students in white GIs practiced their katas with practiced precision. The smell of sweat and determination filled the air, mixed with the faint scent of the hot dog stand outside on State Street. Tommy had saved every penny from his part-time job at his uncle's corner store to afford the monthly fees here. His family had moved to Chicago from San Francisco just 6 months ago, when his father got transferred to work at the Boeing plant. Master Chen, a compact man in his 50s with graying temples, noticed the newcomer immediately. He approached with the measured steps of someone who had spent decades perfecting his movements. "You here for trial class?" Master Chen asked, his accent still carrying traces of his Hong Kong origins despite 30 years in America. Tommy nodded nervously. "Yes, sir. I called yesterday about beginner classes." "Good. You have experience?" "A little. I took some classes back in California, but nothing serious." From across the room, Marcus Rivera looked up from adjusting his black belt. At 18, Marcus was everything Tommy was not. 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with the confident swagger that came from 3 years of tournaments and a reputation as the school's star student. His dark eyes assessed the new arrival with barely concealed amusement. "Fresh meat," Marcus muttered to his training partner. Jake Sullivan, another black belt who had been training alongside Marcus since they were kids growing up in the South Side. Jake snickered. "Looks like a strong wind could knock him over." Marcus walked over to where Master Chen was showing Tommy the changing area. "Master Chen, you sure this kid is old enough for adult classes? Maybe he should try the Little Dragons program with the 8-year-olds. Several students stopped their training to watch the exchange. Tommy felt heat rise in his cheeks, but kept his expression neutral. He had dealt with bullies before, especially after starting at Lincoln High School mid-semester. Being the small Asian kid in a predominantly white and Latino neighborhood had taught him to pick his battles carefully. "Marcus, return to practice," Master Chen said firmly. Everyone trains here with respect. But Marcus was not finished. He circled around Tommy like a predator sizing up prey. "I'm just saying, Master Chen, we don't want anyone getting hurt. This is a serious dojo, not a daycare center." The other students began to gather, sensing drama. Among them was Sarah Martinez, a green belt in her junior year at Northwestern University, who often helped Master Chen with administrative duties. She frowned at Marcus's behavior, but remained silent, knowing the politics of the dojo. Tommy set down his bag and looked directly at Marcus. "I appreciate your concern, but I can handle myself." Marcus laughed, a sound that echoed off the concrete walls. "Handle yourself? Kid, I've been training here for 8 years. I've won the Illinois State Championship 2 years running. You look like you've never thrown a punch in your life." "Appearances can be deceiving," Tommy replied quietly. "Oh, really?" Marcus stepped closer, using his height advantage to loom over the smaller boy. "Tell you what, Skinny, how about a little demonstration? Just some light sparring so we can see what level to put you at." Master Chen stepped forward. "Marcus, that is enough." New students observed for first class, but Marcus was enjoying the attention too much to stop. "Come on, Master Chen, just like contact. I'll go easy on him." Consider it a welcoming committee. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of traffic on State Street and the rhythmic thud of a heavy bag being worked in the corner. Tommy could feel every eye in the room on him. He knew this moment would define his place in the school's hierarchy. "If it's just like contact," Tommy said finally. "I don't mind." Master Chen looked between the two students, his weathered face unreadable. He had seen this dynamic play out many times over the years. Sometimes the cocky veterans learned humility. Sometimes the newcomers learned their limitations. Either way, it usually resolved itself quickly. "Very well. Light contact only. Protective gear." As the two boys moved to opposite sides of the training area, the other students formed a loose circle. Sarah shook her head disapprovingly while Jake grinned in anticipation. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tommy had not mentioned to anyone that his little experience in California had been 5 years of intensive training under his grandfather, a man who had learned martial arts in post-war Japan and brought those skills to America in the 1960s. Marcus strutted to the center of the mat, rolling his shoulders and cracking his knuckles with theatrical flair. The black belt around his waist seemed to gleam under the harsh fluorescent lights as he assumed his fighting stance. A textbook karate position with his left foot forward, hands raised in perfect form. "Remember, light contact only," Master Chen announced, though his tone suggested he was more concerned about Tommy's welfare than Marcus's restraint. Tommy moved to the opposite side of the circle, his movements economical and precise. He bowed respectfully to Marcus, a gesture that earned a few nods of approval from the more traditional students. Marcus returned the bow with exaggerated ceremony, clearly enjoying his role as the experienced fighter about to educate a newcomer. "You can back out any time." "Kid," Marcus called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No shame in knowing your limits." The other students exchanged glances. Jake Sullivan leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, already imagining the story he would tell his friends at school tomorrow. Sarah Martinez found herself hoping the whole thing would end quickly without anyone getting hurt. Tommy said nothing, simply settling into a stance that looked deceptively casual. His grandfather had taught him that true martial arts began with stillness, with the ability to remain calm when others sought to provoke. "Begin," Master Chen called. Marcus immediately launched into an aggressive combination, a series of punches and kicks designed more to impress the audience than to effectively engage his opponent. His technique was solid, exactly what one would expect from a tournament competitor who had spent years drilling the same movements. Tommy stepped back smoothly, letting each attack pass just inches from his body. He made no attempt to counter, simply moving like water around Marcus's aggressive advances. To the untrained eye, it looked like he was barely avoiding being overwhelmed. "Come on!" Marcus taunted between combinations. "Fight back! Don't just run away!" The watching students began to murmur among themselves. Some felt sorry for Tommy, while others were growing bored with what seemed like a one-sided demonstration. Only Master Chen remained silent, his experienced eyes noting details that the younger students missed. Marcus pressed his attack, throwing a high roundhouse kick that should have forced Tommy to either block or retreat significantly. Instead, Tommy simply ducked under the kick and stepped to the side, ending up in a position where he could have easily swept Marcus's standing leg. But he did not take the opportunity. "Stop playing around," Marcus snapped, his face beginning to flush with exertion and frustration.
"This isn't tag! You're supposed to fight!"
For the first time since the match began, Tommy spoke. "I am fighting. I'm just not attacking. That's not fighting, that's running." Marcus changed tactics, attempting to grab Tommy in a clinch. If he could use his size and strength advantage to control the smaller boy, he could demonstrate his superiority more clearly. But as his hands reached for Tommy's GI, they seemed to grasp only air. Tommy had shifted his weight and slipped away so smoothly that Marcus stumbled forward, off balance. The watching students gasped as Marcus nearly fell face first onto the mat, catching himself at the last second with an awkward stumble. "Lucky," Marcus muttered, but his confidence was beginning to crack. The next few minutes followed the same pattern. Marcus would attack with increasing aggression and decreasing technique, while Tommy simply was not there when the attacks arrived. It was like watching someone try to punch smoke. Sarah found herself leaning forward, fascinated, despite her initial disapproval of the match. There was something almost hypnotic about the way Tommy moved. Not flashy or dramatic, but with a precision that seemed to waste no energy whatsoever. Master Chen's weathered face remained impassive, but internally, he was revising his assessment of the new student. The boy's footwork was extraordinary, his timing impeccable. This was not the work of a casual student from a strip mall dojo. Marcus was breathing hard now, sweat beginning to stain his GI. His attacks were becoming wilder, more desperate. The other students could sense the shift in momentum, even if they could not articulate what they were seeing. "Stand still and fight like a man," Marcus shouted, throwing a wild haymaker that left him completely exposed. Tommy finally moved with intent. In one fluid motion, he stepped inside Marcus's guard, placed his palm gently against Marcus's chest, and gave the slightest push. It was barely more than a touch, but Marcus went stumbling backward, his arms windmilling as he tried to maintain his balance. The room fell completely silent. Marcus stared in disbelief. He had been pushed, Not struck, not kicked, simply pushed, by someone half his size, and it had sent him reeling like a drunk man trying to walk a straight line. "How did you—" Marcus began, but the words died in his throat. Tommy straightened, his breathing still calm and controlled. "Would you like to continue, or should we call it here?" The question was asked without mockery or triumph, simply as a practical matter. But everyone in the room understood that something fundamental had just shifted in the dynamics of Master Chen's Karate Academy. Marcus stood frozen in the center of the mat, his chest heaving as he tried to process what had just happened. The confident smirk that had been his trademark for the past 3 years was nowhere to be found. Around him, the other students whispered among themselves, their voices creating a low buzz that filled the converted warehouse. "That was just luck," Marcus said finally, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "You caught me off guard." Tommy remained in his relaxed stance, showing no signs of the exertion that was written all over Marcus's face. "Would you like to try again?" Master Chen stepped forward, his keen eyes moving between the two students. In his 30 years of teaching, he had witnessed many such encounters, but something about this exchange felt different. The new students' movement had displayed a level of sophistication that spoke of serious training. Training that went far beyond the basics offered at most American dojos. "Marcus," Master Chen said quietly, "perhaps we should—" "No." Marcus cut him off, his pride overriding his better judgment. "I'm not done yet. Kid got lucky once, that's all." Jake Sullivan pushed off from the wall where he had been leaning. As Marcus's closest friend and training partner, he could see the desperation creeping into his buddy's eyes. "Marcus, maybe Master Chen's right. You've made your point." But Marcus was beyond listening to reason. The hierarchy he had spent years building was crumbling in front of everyone who mattered to him. The pretty college girl was watching. The junior students who looked up to him were whispering. And worst of all, he could see the disappointment in Master Chen's eyes. "One more round," Marcus insisted, bouncing on his toes as if preparing for a real fight. "This time I won't hold back." Sarah Martinez felt a knot form in her stomach. She had seen Marcus spar at full intensity during tournament preparation, and the difference between his controlled techniques and his competitive aggression was substantial. "Master Chen, maybe we should stop this." But Tommy spoke before the instructor could respond. "It's okay. If it will help him feel better about the situation, I don't mind continuing." The casual way he said it, as if he were discussing the weather rather than facing down an increasingly agitated black belt, sent a chill through the room. There was no bravado in his voice, no attempt to intimidate or impress, just a simple statement of fact. Master Chen studied Tommy's face for a long moment. The boy's eyes were calm, focused, but there was something else there, a depth of experience that seemed impossible in someone so young. "Very well, but I will stop this match the moment I see excessive contact." Marcus cracked his knuckles again, this time with less theatricality and more genuine preparation. He had competed in tournaments across Illinois and Indiana, had faced opponents with years more experience, had earned his reputation through dedication and skill. He would not be embarrassed by some skinny kid from California. The two fighters moved to opposite sides of the circle again. This time, Marcus's bow was perfunctory, his mind already focused on strategy. He would use his reach advantage, keep Tommy at a distance, and use his superior conditioning to wear down his smaller opponent. "Begin!" Master Chen called. Marcus exploded forward with a different energy than before. His techniques were still tournament perfect, but now they carried real intent. A straight punch that whistled through the air where Tommy's head had been a split second earlier. A low kick that would have swept most opponents off their feet if it had connected. But Tommy was simply not there. This time, however, his evasion was different. Instead of just moving away from attacks, he seemed to be drawing Marcus forward, deeper into combinations that left the bigger student increasingly off balance. It was like watching a matador work with a bull, except the matador appeared to be completely relaxed, while the bull grew more frantic with each pass. Jake found himself leaning forward despite his loyalty to Marcus. There was something mesmerizing about the way Tommy moved. Not just fast, but economical, as if every step had been calculated to serve multiple purposes. He had never seen anything quite like it. Sarah was thinking the same thing. During her 3 years at the academy, she had watched Marcus spar with dozens of opponents, including visiting black belts from other schools. None of them had made him look so clumsy. After 2 minutes of increasingly desperate attacks, Marcus finally overcommitted to a spinning heel kick, a flashy technique that worked well in tournaments but required perfect timing and distance. Tommy stepped inside the arc of the kick, placed his hand on Marcus's extended leg, and guided him gently to the ground. Marcus found himself sitting on the mat, looking up at Tommy in complete bewilderment. He had not been thrown, not been struck, not even been pushed particularly hard. Yet somehow he was on the floor, while his smaller opponent stood calmly above him, not even breathing hard. The silence in the room was deafening. Even the sounds from State Street seemed muted, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Tommy extended his hand to help Marcus up. "You have excellent technique. Your forms are very precise." It was not condescension or mockery, just a simple observation delivered without malice. But somehow that made it worse for Marcus than any insult would have been. Marcus stared at Tommy's outstretched hand for several seconds before finally accepting the help up. His face burned with embarrassment as he rose to his feet, acutely aware that every person in the dojo had just witnessed his complete inability to land even a single technique on someone half his size. The other students remained silent, unsure how to process what they had just seen. Jake Sullivan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, while Sarah Martinez found herself studying Tommy with new interest. This was clearly not the typical beginner student they were accustomed to welcoming. Master Chen stepped forward, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. "Tommy, would you mind sharing with us where you trained before coming to Chicago?" Tommy adjusted his GI, which had somehow remained perfectly neat despite the sparring session. "My grandfather taught me. He learned in Japan after the war, then moved to California in the 1960s. "And his name?" Master Chen asked, though his tone suggested he might already suspect the answer. "Kenji Nakamura. He studied under Sensei Yamaguchi before coming to America." A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Even the younger students recognized the name. Yamaguchi was legendary in traditional karate circles, known for developing some of the most sophisticated defensive techniques in modern martial arts. Master Chen nodded slowly. "I had the honor of meeting your grandfather once, at a tournament in Los Angeles in 1972. He was formidable." "He still is," Tommy said with a slight smile. "He's 83 now, but he can still make me look foolish on the mat." Marcus felt his anger beginning to transform into something else. Not quite respect, but at least understanding. Being defeated by the grandson of a master who had trained under one of Japan's greatest teachers was different from being embarrassed by some random kid off the street. "Why didn't you mention this before?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Tommy shrugged. "You didn't ask. Besides, I'm here to learn, not to impress anyone. Master Chen's reputation is excellent. My grandfather researched Chicago schools before we moved and spoke very highly of this place." The compliment seemed to ease some of the tension in the room. Several students began to relax, realizing that they had just witnessed something special rather than simply embarrassing. But Marcus was still struggling with his wounded pride. "If you're so experienced, why are you starting in beginner classes?" "Because I'm a beginner here," Tommy replied simply. "Every school has its own approach, its own techniques. I have a lot to learn about Master Chen's methods." Master Chen stepped closer to Tommy, studying him with the intensity of someone who had spent decades evaluating martial artists. "Show me your kata, whichever one you feel most comfortable with." Tommy bowed and moved to the center of the mat. Without announcement or fanfare, he began to perform a traditional kata, a series of movements that told the story of combat, against multiple invisible opponents. What followed was unlike anything the students at Master Chen's academy had ever seen. Tommy's movements flowed like water, each technique transitioning seamlessly into the next with a precision that spoke of thousands of hours of practice. There was no wasted motion, no unnecessary flourish, just pure, functional martial arts distilled to its essence. Jake found himself mesmerized by the performance. He had always considered Marcus to be the gold standard for technique. But watching Tommy's kata was like comparing a high school orchestra to the Chicago Symphony. Both could play the same music, but the level of artistry was in completely different leagues. Sarah was thinking about the implications for her own training. She had been proud of her green belt, earned through consistent effort and regular attendance, but seeing what true mastery looked like made her realize how much further she had to go. When Tommy finished the kata, the room remained silent for several seconds. Finally, Master Chen began to clap. a slow, respectful applause that was soon joined by the other students. Even Marcus found himself clapping, though his expression remained conflicted. "Beautiful," Master Chen said simply. "Your grandfather trained you well," Tommy bowed again. "Thank you, Master Chen. He always said that the real learning begins when you think you know everything." The comment was clearly directed at no one in particular, but Marcus felt it like a physical blow. He had been so confident in his abilities, so sure of his place in the school's hierarchy, that he had never considered how much he still had to learn. Master Chen turned to address the class. "I think we have all learned something important today. Respect is earned not through intimidation, but through humility and dedication. Tommy, you are welcome to train with us at whatever level you feel appropriate." "Thank you, Master Chen. I'd like to start with the beginner classes, if that's okay. I want to understand your teaching methods from the ground up." As the students began to disperse, gathering their gear and preparing to leave, Marcus found himself alone with his thoughts. For 3 years, he had been the undisputed star of the academy, the student everyone else looked up to and aspired to emulate. Now, in the space of 10 minutes, his entire worldview had been shaken. Jake approached him cautiously. "You okay, man?" Marcus looked at his friend, then at Tommy, who was quietly packing his duffel bag in the corner. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I really don't know." 3 weeks had passed since that memorable afternoon at Master Chen's Karate Academy. The incident had rippled through the Chicago martial arts community like a stone thrown into still water, with various versions of the story spreading from school to school. By the time it reached the karate tournament circuit, Tommy Nakamura had supposedly defeated 3 black belts simultaneously while blindfolded. But within the walls of the converted warehouse on State Street, a different kind of transformation was taking place. Marcus Rivera stood at the edge of the training mat, watching Tommy work with a group of white and yellow belt students. The smaller boy moved among them with patience and precision, adjusting stances, correcting techniques, and offering gentle encouragement. It was a far cry from Marcus's own teaching style, which had always relied more on demonstration than explanation. "He's good with them," Sarah Martinez observed, joining Marcus at the side of the mat. She had been working on administrative tasks in the office, but found herself drawn to watch Tommy's informal teaching sessions. Marcus nodded grudgingly. "Yeah, he is." Over the past 3 weeks, Marcus had watched Tommy integrate seamlessly into the academy's culture. The new student attended every class he could fit around his part-time job at his uncle's store, always arriving early and staying late to help clean the mats. He never corrected other students directly, instead asking Master Chen quiet questions that led the instructor to make suggestions that helped everyone improve. Most remarkably, Tommy had never once mentioned his dramatic introduction to the school. When newer students asked about his background, he simply said he had trained in California and redirected the conversation to their own progress. It was as if the entire confrontation with Marcus had been forgotten. But Marcus had not forgotten. The memory of sitting on that mat, looking up at someone he had tried to humiliate, had haunted his sleep for weeks. He had won his black belt through dedication and hard work, had earned respect through tournament victories and consistent performance. Yet in 10 minutes, all of that had been rendered meaningless by a skinny 15-year-old with calm eyes and impossible technique. Master Chen approached, carrying a clipboard with the evening's training schedule. "Marcus, I would like to speak with you." They walked to the instructor's small office, a cramped space filled with martial arts magazines, tournament trophies, and photographs spanning 3 decades of teaching. Master Chen gestured for Marcus to sit, then settled behind his desk, with the careful movements of someone who had absorbed his share of hard impacts over the years. "You have been distracted lately," Master Chen observed. "Your technique remains sharp, but your spirit seems troubled." Marcus stared at his hands. "I've been thinking about things, about what happened with Tommy." "Ah." Master Chen leaned back in his chair. "And what have you concluded?" "That I'm not as good as I thought I was." "Interesting. And what do you plan to do with this knowledge?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He had expected sympathy, perhaps some reassurance about his abilities, not a challenge to think deeper about his situation. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've always been the best student here. People looked up to me, asked me for advice. Now I feel like a fraud." Master Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching the training through his office window. Tommy was demonstrating a basic block to a 10-year-old student, breaking down the movement into simple components that the child could understand and replicate. Tell me, Marcus, why did you begin training?
To learn martial arts, to get better at fighting.
And have you learned martial arts? I thought I had, but have you learned martial arts? Master Chen repeated, his voice firm but not unkind. Marcus considered the question seriously. Yes, I know the techniques, I can perform the katas, I can spar effectively with most opponents. Then you have succeeded in your original goal. The problem is that your goals have changed without your realizing it. What do you mean? Master Chen pointed to the training floor, where Tommy was now helping the same 10-year-old practice kicks against a padded target. When you started training, you wanted to learn. Somewhere along the way, you began wanting to be seen as someone who had learned. The focus shifted from the process to the result. Marcus watched Tommy patiently adjust the child's stance for the 5th time, never showing frustration or impatience. He makes it look so easy, because for him it is easy. Not the techniques. Those require the same practice and dedication they always have. But the ego, the need to prove himself, the fear of being seen as inadequate, these things do not seem to burden him. So what do I do? Master Chen smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from his instructor in weeks. You go back to learning. You remember why you started training in the first place. And perhaps you ask yourself what Tommy might be able to teach you. The idea of learning from someone he had tried to humiliate was difficult to swallow, but Marcus found himself nodding. Do you think he would be willing to help me? There is only one way to find out. 20 minutes later, as the evening class was winding down and students were changing back into street clothes, Marcus approached Tommy near the equipment storage area. Hey, Marcus said, the word coming out more awkwardly than he had intended. Tommy looked up from organizing the protective gear he had been helping to put away. Hey, I wanted to apologize for that first day. The way I acted was completely out of line. Tommy straightened, giving Marcus his full attention. Thank you for saying that. It takes courage to apologize. I was wondering... Marcus hesitated, then forced himself to continue. Would you be willing to train with me sometime? Not sparring, he added quickly. Just, I feel like I have a lot to learn, and I think you could help me understand some things I'm missing. Tommy was quiet for a moment, and Marcus felt his heart sink. But then the smaller boy smiled. The first completely unguarded expression Marcus had seen from him. I'd be honored to train with you. My grandfather always said that the best way to learn is to teach, and the best way to teach is to learn from others. As they shook hands, Marcus felt something he had not experienced in years, genuine excitement about training, unmarred by ego or competition. Tomorrow, he would begin learning martial arts all over again. Outside on State Street, the late evening traffic hummed with the rhythm of a city that never quite slept. Inside Master Chen's Karate Academy, 2 young men had taken the first steps toward understanding what it truly meant to be warriors. The gym had indeed been silenced by what Tommy did next, but not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of proving his superiority, he had quietly demonstrated something far more powerful: the difference between fighting to win and fighting to grow.